What's going on, guys? Abrasus here. Well, it's nice to be back after such a long break. Today we'll have another general tactics video. I thought that this is a nice video to start again. So, because we've all been in these situations where either we messed something up or the dice messed us up, and the situation looked very doom and gloom, and we all wanted to surrender at this point. But we'll talk about why not to do that, and how to counteract either your bad plays or the bad luck on dice. But first, let's move to the game which made me aware of this thing the most, I think. And this is known and loved Pokemon series. I guess all of you who ever played Pokemon wouldn't have trouble guessing who's that Pokemon. So let's leave this for now. And for the rest of you, let's talk about how the games work. Basically, you have two creatures fighting, and you have some moves to pick from. This is the basic game, but the competitive side is much different. For the competitive side, you are playing double battles, so 2 Pokemon versus 2 Pokemon, and the teams consist of 4. And you have the World Championship in it with pretty nice prizes, because I think that the first prize is around 5,000 bucks. I've been following it for quite some time in the past, and the one thing that I definitely learned is that you have very different moves in Pokemon, many of them damaging, some of them having some special effects. But there are 2 effects that are particularly annoying to players, to high competitive players. Because as in Fantasy Battle, if you are a good competitive player, you want to avoid the luck as much as you can. But the 2 particular things that I'm thinking of is first the critical hits mechanic. Before it was 6.5% to critical hit your opponent and do 50% more damage. So this was really annoying. Now I think they lowered it to like 4%, but this is still really annoying because it might totally mess up your plan. And the second one is freeze mechanics. Some moves like Ice Beam have a 10% chance to freeze your opponent, and frozen Pokemon cannot do anything. They have only 20% chance to thaw out every turn. So getting a freeze on your opponent is usually a good game. Because of the luck issues, the championships are played in a system of best of 3. But still, this is not the greatest one, especially because all the top cuts are played by the cup system. So if you are getting eliminated, you are basically done. But back to the point of the video, you obviously find yourself very often in situations where you can no longer win one particular game against your opponent. So what the players are doing, and they are actively talking about it, is they are basically fishing for a crit, or fishing for a freeze, or fishing for any other wonky mechanic that is inbuilt in the game. Because, for example, not all moves have 100% accuracy. So even though the game mostly depends on your ability to play better and to outsmart your opponent and to win the psychological war there, at some point you also might want to wish for something miraculous to happen. And I've seen it happen so many times, because the odds are not that bad if you think about it, especially if you have several tries at such lucky moments. I think the most luck I've seen is at the national championships in the United States. The guy used move Protect consecutively 4 times, which succeeds always the first time, but every next time has a further chance of succeeding from the previous one. So the second one has a 33% chance, the third one has 11% chance, and the next one has 3% chance, roughly. So while it is really annoying to your opponent, it is sometimes your only way out, and they are not ashamed of talking about it, and they are not ashamed of thinking about it. And when they are in bad situation, when you look at the streamers, they will often try to actively find what can you do to win basically only with luck. Not with your skill, not with your planning, but with luck. What would you need to happen for you to still win this game, which seems totally unwinnable? Okay, so let's move to another example. But before, we need to solve our contest. So for those of you who guessed right, congratulations. Yes, it's a Pikachu. Okay, so the next one is Bridge. This is actually a very cool game. cool enough to be distinct from poker, but not cool enough to be relevant. For those of you who don't know it, it's a card game for 4 people, and you are playing with your partner. So this is basically 2 versus 2. Well, not to stretch it, the goal is to take as many cards as possible in a 13 card deal. So you each have 13 cards. And in Bridge, this is a bit different from Pokemon, because as you might have observed, in Pokemon you have this 0-1 concept. So it's a bit different from our game or from Bridge in particular, because you either win a game or lose a game. There is nothing in between. There is no option of draw, especially because this is best of 3. But here in Bridge, in many tournaments, you are playing in a system where your result depends on the results of a lot of other players. Because you have a tournament for example, 100 people, and half of them will play with exactly the same cards as you and your partner have, because the other half will play with the cards that your opponents have. And your result is dependent on how well do you fare compared to the rest of the players. So for example, if you play the better contract and you get a better score than 50% of the players, you will be awarded the 50% points. That's simple enough, I guess. The problem is that Bridge is a game where you have to calculate a lot, and where you have to remember what cards can your opponent have based on several different factors. And there also comes a time in a situation where, for example, your opponents in total have 6 clubs. And it might happen that one of them has 6 and other has 0. It is very unlikely, but this might totally ruin your game plan. After such events, you might find yourself in a very bad situation. Also, with the contract that you negotiated, you might end up in a very, very bad spot, and you might think that all is lost. You should just give up on this deal and get around 0% because you will play the worst contract ever. But in many cases, it is very possible to think of a particular distribution of cards that will allow you to still win, or still get trick more. And sometimes even risking getting from, I'd say, 15% score to 5% score, you can risk it. If you fail it, you get 5% score instead of 15. What's the big difference? But if you make it, you get like 90% score, because all of a sudden you made something amazing happen, and you realized the contract that was totally impossible unless this one particular set of cards appeared. This is also basically fishing for luck. Okay, I could multiply these examples in the infinity, because there is a lot of examples like this. But let's move back to our game and main topic, I guess. So, what's the lesson to find from here? If you are in a very doom and gloom situation, you just need to find yourself an odd that will save you. You need to actively look for the situations where you will win despite all the things that happen in the game. You need to look for those 12 charges, you need to try to get the spells with like Comet with 2 dice. There are things that will save you, but if you don't actively look for them, you lose every time. Even on team events, if you are about to get 1 or 2 points out of the game, this doesn't really matter if you get 1 or 2 or 0. So you might as well try to risk it and try to get the charge that will win you the game. And while in previous editions it might have been true that it's not that good to allow your opponent to get lucky, because the 9th age is fairly balanced and the matchups are not very skewed, it is very hard to get a good score when you are not risking anything. So if your opponent is not risking anything in the game, he is pretty unlikely to get a 20 on you, or he's pretty unlikely to even get 16 up. And if he is risking, then you might use that risk against him. But you have to realize that you have to use that risk sometimes, that you will get capped if you don't do anything, because many people will just take the punishment, just allow themselves to get capped without even risking a longer charge, or risking a combat that is not much in their favor. Okay, but this was very, very specific, right? We are talking about only a very specific situations where you are lost, where you can't do anything. But can we apply this further? Spoiler alert, yes, we can. So the point is, you can also fish for those chances, even in the parts of the game, even in small situations, even if you don't necessarily need to risk it. For example, your opponent blocked your unit on the march check. If you fail your march check, you lose your unit. This is not the end of the world, but it's pretty not okay. But you can, for example, try a charge on a 12 into the unit that is supposedly going to kill your unit with some non-important like zombies in the flank. Because if the zombies have nothing better to do, then you might as well go for the 12 charge, right? If you make this 12 charge, you will save your unit even if you fail the march check. So you are basically creating another chance for you to survive the situation. And the odds add up really quickly. You can totally imagine that your opponent, for example, will need to have a leadership 9 check on a fear and has to make a 5 roll on the charge, and then has to cast a spell with 3 dice and roll an 8. And those 3 are pretty much usual stuff, right? And this is only a bit over 50% in his favor. And now counting on things like my opponent will fail one of his spells in his magic phase is also a legit thing, because if your opponent needs to cast 4 spells and he needs roughly 80% on all of them, then he will easily get below 50% to get a casting value on each one of them. So in the end, the lesson is you need to actively search for the situations and actively try to improve your luck and actively try to get the odds in your favor. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you in the next one. Cheers!